The day my son told me I was on my own, I didn't cry. I didn't argue. I sat in the chair where I'd held his mother's hand for 5 years, while Alzheimer's stole her name by name. Then I called my lawyer and said 4 words. Change everything. Tonight. 8 weeks later, Nathan read a letter that destroyed the future he thought he'd already stolen. I'm truly grateful you're here with me today. Before we go any further, tell me where you're watching from. Drop your city or country in the comments. And, if you don't mind me asking, how old are you this year? I really want to know who's walking this journey with me. Also, a quick note. This story includes some fictional elements woven in for reflection and storytelling purposes. Any resemblance to real names or places is purely coincidental. But the message I'm sharing with you is very real. Let me take you back to where it started. November 9th, 2024. My 70th birthday. I woke up at 5:30 that morning. The way I always do. No alarm. My body has kept the same schedule for 40 years. And retirement didn't change that. Dorothy used to joke that I'd wake up at 5:30 on the day of my own funeral just to make sure the coffin was structurally sound. That was her sense of humor. Quiet. Precise. And always a little sharper than you expected. Dorothy had been gone 3 years by then. Pancreatic cancer is what the death certificate said. But that's not really what took her. Alzheimer's took her first. Slowly. Methodically. The way rust eats through a steel beam. You don't notice it at first. A forgotten word here. A misplaced key there. Then one morning your wife of 41 years looks at you across the breakfast table and asks who you are. I spent 5 years caring for her. 5 years of feeding her, bathing her, reading to her from books she no longer understood. 5 years of watching the woman who once corrected my engineering calculations forget how to hold a spoon. I never complained. Not once. That's what you do when you love someone. You show up. Every single day. You show up. Nathan didn't. My son visited twice during those 5 years. Twice. The first time, Dorothy still recognized him. She grabbed his hand and said his name and cried. The second time, she stared at him like he was a stranger delivering mail. Nathan stood in the doorway for 11 minutes. I counted. Then he said he had to get back to Seattle. And he left. I heard his car pull out of the driveway, and I didn't hear from him again for 7 months. I don't say this to make him sound like a monster. I say it because it matters later. Nathan wasn't cruel. He was afraid. There's a difference, though the result often looks the same. After Dorothy passed in October of 2021, I buried her at Riverview Cemetery on a Tuesday afternoon. The rain came down sideways, the way it does in Portland when the sky decides to grieve along with you. Nathan stood beside me at the grave. He put his hand on my shoulder. He said he was sorry. Then he flew back to Seattle the next morning. And our conversations became monthly phone calls that lasted exactly 12 minutes. I didn't chase him. Engineers solve problems, but you can't engineer a relationship with someone who doesn't want to be in the same room as you. So I did what I've always done. I worked. My name is Walter Prescott. For 37 years I designed bridges. Not the metaphorical kind. Real ones. Steel and concrete and tension cables stretched across rivers and canyons and interstate highways. I hold 12 patents in structural engineering, innovations in load-bearing distribution, and seismic reinforcement that are still used in bridge construction across North America. Those patents generate royalty income. Significant royalty income. $2.5 million over the past decade. To be precise, I live in a 4,200 square foot home in the West Hills neighborhood of Portland, Oregon. I bought it in 1989 when Dorothy was pregnant with Nathan. She picked it for the porch. Wide. Wraparound. With a view of Mount Hood on clear days. She said a house wasn't a home unless you could sit outside and watch the world slow down. We spent 40 years on that porch. Now I sit there alone. The house is worth about $1.9 million. My investment portfolio sits at $2.8 million. Combined with the patents, my total estate is roughly $7.2 million. I mention this not to boast. I mention it because this number is the reason my son's wife decided I was worth befriending. And it's the reason my son decided I wasn't worth keeping. On the morning of November 9th, I made coffee in Dorothy's favorite mug, the blue one with the chipped handle that she refused to throw away, because Nathan had given it to her when he was 9. I scrambled 2 eggs, buttered 1 slice of toast, and sat at the kitchen table alone. No phone call from Nathan. No card. No text message. I wasn't surprised. Disappointed. Yes, but not surprised. Disappointment is a quieter thing when you've had practice. By noon, I'd cleaned the kitchen, organized my study, and reviewed the quarterly royalty statements from my patent licensing firm. The numbers were strong. They always were. Bridges don't go out of style. People always need to cross from one side to the other. At 4:15 in the afternoon, I sat down at my desk and opened my laptop. There was one new email. The sender's name made my chest tighten in a way I hadn't felt since the doctor told me Dorothy's diagnosis was confirmed. Nathan Prescott. Subject line: a message from your son. I stared at it for a long time. The cursor blinked. Rain tapped against the window behind me. Somewhere down the street, a neighbor's dog barked twice and went quiet. I didn't open it. Not yet. I poured myself a second cup of coffee, walked to the porch, and stood there watching the clouds settle over Mount Hood. Dorothy would have told me to open it. She would have said, "Whatever it says, you'll handle it. You always do." She was right about most things. But she'd never read what was inside that email. I went back inside at 4:47. The coffee had gone cold. I sat down, placed my hands on the desk the way I used to, before opening a critical stress report, and clicked the email. 6 sentences. That's all it was. I counted them the way I count load-bearing calculations. Precisely. Dad, I need to be honest with you about something I've been thinking about for a long time. As you get older, I want you to know that I won't be able to take care of you. I have my own family, my own responsibilities, and my own life to manage. I watched what happened with Mom, and I can't go through that again. Please don't expect me to be there when things get hard. I think it's best if you start planning for your future on your own. I read it once. Then I read it again. The second time was worse, because the words didn't change. I sat there for what felt like an hour. It might have been 10 minutes. When you're trying to process the fact that your only child has written you off like an expired insurance policy, time doesn't behave the way it should. The 5th sentence echoed louder than the rest. Please don't expect me to be there when things get hard. I thought about what hard looked like. Hard was holding Dorothy's hand at 3 in the morning while she screamed because she didn't recognize her own bedroom. Hard was changing her sheets twice a night because the medication made her sick. Hard was sitting across from a neurologist who told me, with the practiced calm of a man who delivers bad news for a living, that my wife would forget my name within the year. She did. 7 months later, she looked at me and said, "Excuse me, are you the nurse?" That was hard. And I didn't ask anyone for help. Not Nathan. Not anyone. Now my son. The boy I taught to ride a bicycle on Thurman Street. The boy who cried when his goldfish died and insisted we hold a funeral in the backyard. The boy who once told me at age 7 that he wanted to build bridges just like his dad. That boy was telling me not to expect him when things got hard. I closed the laptop. I didn't slam it. I didn't throw it. I closed it the way you close a book. You know you'll have to read again. Gently. Because the pages still have power over you. I walked to the living room and stood in front of the fireplace. Above the mantel hung a photograph from Nathan's wedding. June of 2019. Dorothy was there. Still herself, still sharp, still beautiful in a lavender dress she'd picked out 3 months in advance. Nathan stood beside his bride, grinning, his arm around her waist. I remembered his toast at the reception. He'd raised a glass and said, "I want to thank my parents for showing me what a real marriage looks like. 40 years of love. That's the standard I'm going to try to live up to." 5 years later, he couldn't even call me on my birthday. I thought about pouring a drink. Bourbon, the bottle Dorothy gave me for our 35th anniversary. Still 3/4 full, because I only drank it on nights when missing her became physical. This qualified. But I didn't reach for the bottle. Instead, I reached for my phone. There are moments in life when you have two choices. You can feel or you can act. I've never been good at the first one. Dorothy handled the feeling for both of us. She was the warmth. I was the structure. Without her, I was just a frame standing in an empty field. But a frame still holds weight. A frame can still be useful. I scrolled through my contacts and found the name I was looking for. Catherine Ellis, attorney at law, specializing in estate planning, trusts, and elder law. I'd known Catherine for 23 years. She and Dorothy had met at a fundraiser for the Portland Children's Museum in 2001, and they'd been close ever since. When Dorothy was diagnosed, Catherine helped me set up the medical power of attorney. When Dorothy passed, Catherine handled the will. She was the only person outside of the hospital who saw me cry. I pressed call. It rang 3 times. "Happy birthday, Walter." Her voice was warm but careful. The way people speak to you when they suspect something's wrong but don't want to assume. "How bad is it?" I told her about the email. Read it to her word for word. She listened without interrupting, which is something Catherine does better than anyone I've ever met. When I finished, there was a pause. Not a long one. 3 seconds. Maybe 4. "Walter," she said, "that email is not what it seems." "What do you mean?" "I mean the language is too clean, too structured, too deliberate. That doesn't read like a son setting a boundary. It reads like a legal strategy. Someone coached him on this." I hadn't considered that. I'd been so focused on the pain of what Nathan said that I hadn't stopped to analyze how he said it. But Catherine was right. Nathan didn't write like that. Nathan sent texts with misspellings and forgot to capitalize his own name. This email was polished, professional, cold in a way that felt rehearsed rather than felt. "Who?" I asked. Catherine was quiet for a moment. "How well do you know your daughter-in-law?" I thought about Brooke, Nathan's wife of 5 years. Blonde, sharp-featured, always smiling, always asking questions. She worked in some kind of consulting, though the specifics had always been vague. She'd visited my home 4 times since the wedding. Each time, she'd complimented the house, asked about the neighborhood, and found a way to bring up property values. "Not well enough," I said. "Then we need to fix that," Catherine replied. "Don't respond to the email. Don't call Nathan. Don't do anything. Just wait." "Can you do that?" I looked at the closed laptop on my desk. The email behind the screen. My son's words still burning like acid on paper. "I'm an engineer, Catherine. Patience is the first thing they teach you." "Good. Because I have a feeling this is going to take a while." She was right. It took 3 months, 2 private investigators, and 1 forged bank account to uncover the truth. But that night, standing in my study with the phone pressed to my ear and the rain hammering against the windows, I didn't know any of that yet. All I knew was that my son had written me off, and somewhere behind his words, someone else was holding the pen. 2 weeks after the email, Nathan showed up at my front door with flowers and a smile. The flowers were Brooke's idea. The smile was rehearsed. I could tell because it didn't reach his eyes. Nathan has my jaw and Dorothy's eyes. Gray-blue and expressive, the kind that give away everything he's trying to hide. That afternoon, his eyes said guilt. His mouth said, "Happy Thanksgiving, Dad." They arrived at 11:30. Nathan carried a bottle of wine and a bakery pumpkin pie. Brooke walked beside him in a cream-colored cashmere sweater and camel wool coat, her blonde hair styled in loose waves that looked effortless but probably took an hour. She smiled the way flight attendants smile. Wide, practiced, and completely disconnected from anything happening behind it. Behind them came the only two people in that family who had never lied to me. Emma was 8. Thin, quiet, observant. She had Dorothy's cheekbones and a habit of tilting her head when she was thinking, exactly the way her grandmother used to. She carried a sketchbook under her arm and walked up to me with a folded piece of paper. "Happy birthday, Grandpa. I know it was 2 weeks ago. I made you something." Inside was a pencil drawing of a bridge. Not a child's scribble. An actual bridge, with cables and towers and water beneath it. Underneath, in careful handwriting, she'd written, "Grandpa builds bridges so people can get to each other." Something in my chest cracked. Not broke. Cracked. The way concrete cracks before it gives way. Lucas was 5. Loud, fearless, built like a small battering ram. He ran straight past everyone, crashed into my legs, and shouted, "Grandpa, do you still have the train set?" He was up the stairs before I finished the sentence. For a moment, standing there with Emma's drawing in my hand and Lucas's footsteps thundering overhead, I almost forgot about the email. Almost forgot what Catherine had said. Almost believed this was just a family coming together the way families are supposed to. Then Brooke spoke. "Walter, your home looks absolutely beautiful." She stepped inside, scanning the living room with the slow, deliberate gaze of someone appraising inventory. "The woodwork is stunning. Is this original? Must be worth a fortune." "It's original," I said. 1923. "Incredible." She ran her fingers along the doorframe. "You know, in Seattle, a house like this would go for $2.5 million easy. Portland market is probably similar, right?" I didn't answer. I gestured toward the dining room. Turkey should be ready by 1. I'd spent 2 days preparing Dorothy's recipes. Her roasted turkey with sage butter. Her cranberry sauce from scratch. Her sweet potato casserole with pecan crumble that Nathan used to eat straight from the baking dish when he was 12. I set the table with Dorothy's good china, the white set with the gold rim she'd inherited from her mother. I did this not because I believed their visit was genuine. I did it because Dorothy would have wanted the table set properly regardless of who was sitting at it. By 1:30, we were eating. Lucas had mashed potato on his chin. Emma sketched between bites. Nathan sat across from me, cutting his turkey with mechanical precision, avoiding eye contact. He complimented the food 3 times in 10 minutes. Too many times. When someone praises your cooking that often, they're compensating for something they're not saying. Brooke sat beside him. And she was magnificent. Not the way Dorothy was magnificent, which was genuine and unplanned. Brooke was magnificent, the way a chess player is magnificent. Every move calculated. "Walter," she said, leaning forward, "have you thought about retirement planning? Financial management? Long-term care? That sort of thing?" "I've managed my finances for 40 years, I said. "I think I'll manage a few more." "Of course." She laughed lightly. "I just mean, with the patents and everything, there's so much to keep track of." Nathan and I were talking about how we could help. Take some of the burden off your shoulders. There it was, soft, careful, wrapped in concern like a razor blade in cotton. "That's kind of you," I said. "I'll think about it." After dinner, I washed dishes while Brooke pulled Nathan into the living room. The children had gone upstairs. I stood at the sink, hands in warm water, scrubbing Dorothy's china. The kitchen connected to the living room through a hallway with a swinging door I'd left partially open. Brooke's voice came through the gap. Low but clear. "The patent royalties alone are worth millions, Nate. Millions. And he's sitting on all of it. A 70-year-old man living alone in a house this size. It's irresponsible." Nathan's response was quieter. I had to stop scrubbing to hear. I know, but he's my dad. I can't just ask him to hand over. You're not asking him to hand anything over. You're offering to help. There's a difference. Just be nice for now. We talked about this. Silence. Then Nathan, barely a whisper. I don't know, Brooke. This feels wrong. What feels wrong is your father hoarding $7 million while his grandson needs braces and we can barely make rent. You want to talk about wrong? Wrong is a 70-year-old man who won't share with his own family. I stood perfectly still. Counted to 10. Dried my hands. Walked back through the swinging door. And sat down across from them both. Brooke's smile reappeared instantly, like a light switch. Walter. That pie is divine. I smiled back. We talked about pie. I asked about the children's school. I complimented Brooke's sweater. I did all of this with the calm steadiness of a man who has just overheard the exact blueprint of his own exploitation and has decided not to react. Not yet. Not in front of Emma and Lucas. They left at 6. Nathan hugged me at the door, stiff and brief. Emma squeezed my hand and whispered, I'll draw you another bridge, Grandpa. Lucas waved from the car window, shouting something about trains. I stood on the porch watching their taillights disappear into Portland rain. Then I walked inside and called Catherine. You were right, I said. It's not just Nathan. Tell me everything. I did. Every word. Every glance. Every calculated smile. When I finished, Catherine said the thing that changed everything. Walter, I'm going to recommend a private investigator. Marcus Cole, former Portland police. Very thorough. Very discreet. If your daughter-in-law has a past, Marcus will find it. How soon? Monday. I hung up and looked at the dining table. Dorothy's china was washed and put away. The candles had burned to stubs. The house smelled like sage, and the faintest trace of Brooke's perfume. They thought the old engineer had lost his edge. They had no idea I'd already started counting. Load. Stress. Breaking point. Every structure has one, and I was about to find theirs. Catherine's office sat on the 4th floor of a brownstone on Southwest Morrison Street, wedged between a bookshop and a Thai restaurant. I'd been there 6 times in 23 years. 3 times for pleasant business. 3 times for emergencies. This was the 4th emergency. I arrived at 9 sharp on the Monday after Thanksgiving. The receptionist waved me through without asking. Catherine was already at her desk, reading glasses low on her nose, 2 folders open in front of her. She looked up when I walked in and gestured to the chair across from her. Sit down, Walter. We have a lot to cover. Catherine Ellis was 58 years old. Tall. Sharp-featured. With silver-streaked dark hair she wore pinned back in a way that meant business. She'd graduated top of her class at Lewis and Clark Law School, spent 15 years in estate litigation, and built a practice specializing in trusts, elder law, and asset protection. Dorothy had loved her. They'd met at a fundraiser in 2001 and became the kind of friends who finished each other's sentences. When Dorothy was diagnosed, Catherine cried in her car for 20 minutes before coming inside to help me with the paperwork. She told me this 2 years later. That's the kind of woman she was. She felt everything but never let it slow her down. I sat across from her and placed my phone on the desk. I want you to hear something, I said, and played back the conversation I'd overheard at Thanksgiving. I'd recorded it on my phone while standing at the kitchen sink. The audio was imperfect, muffled by distance and running water. But Brooke's words cut through clearly enough. The patent royalties alone are worth millions. Just be nice for now. Catherine listened with her hands folded. When it ended, she removed her glasses and set them on the desk. Walter, I need to ask you something, and I need you to answer honestly. Do you believe Nathan is acting independently? No, I said. I don't think he wrote that email either. Neither do I. She opened the first folder. After you called me on Thanksgiving night, I did some preliminary research. Your daughter-in-law's maiden name is Callahan. Brooke Callahan. She graduated from Arizona State with a degree in paralegal studies in 2012. She then worked at a law firm in Phoenix called Whitmore and Grant. They specialize in estate disputes and inheritance litigation. I felt something tighten behind my ribs. The kind of sensation you get when you're inspecting a bridge and you notice a hairline fracture in a support beam. Small, almost invisible, but potentially catastrophic. She left Whitmore and Grant in 2017. Catherine continued. The circumstances of her departure are unclear. No public termination record, but she didn't list them as a reference on any subsequent applications. That's unusual for someone who worked there 5 years. You think she was fired. I think we need Marcus to confirm it. But the pattern concerns me. She tapped the folder. A woman with professional training in estate law marries into a family with significant assets. And within 5 years, the elderly patriarch receives a carefully worded email distancing his only heir. Then 2 weeks later, the same family shows up with smiles and questions about financial management. She looked at me steadily. Walter, in Oregon, what I'm describing has a legal name. It's called elder financial exploitation. And it's a Class C felony. The word felony sat in the air between us like a steel beam dropped on marble. Heavy. Final. What do you recommend? I asked. She opened the second folder. First, I'm freezing your current will immediately. No changes can be made without both of us present and a notarized witness. Second, I'm placing a fraud alert on all your financial accounts. If anyone tries to open a joint account, transfer funds, or modify beneficiary designations using your name, we'll know within 24 hours. Third, Marcus Cole starts Monday. I've already briefed him. He'll run a full background check on Brooke. Employment history, financial records, prior marriages, civil suits, criminal record. If there is one. Prior marriages? Catherine paused. It's standard procedure, Walter. We check everything. I nodded. What do I do in the meantime? Nothing. That's the hardest part. You act normal. If Nathan calls, you answer. If Brooke asks about finances, you deflect politely. You don't confront. You don't accuse. You give them absolutely no reason to think you suspect anything. I've spent 40 years reading stress reports and detecting flaws invisible to the naked eye, I said. I think I can manage a conversation with my daughter-in-law. Catherine almost smiled. I know you can. That's why I'm not worried about you. I'm worried about what Marcus is going to find. I drove home through steady rain. Portland in December is a city built from gray. Gray sky, gray pavement, gray light, filtering through gray clouds. Dorothy used to say the rain made the city honest. You can't hide behind sunshine in Portland. Everything shows. I parked in the garage and walked to my study. The room hadn't changed in 30 years. Oak desk, drafting table, bookshelves lined with engineering manuals and bound patent filings. On the wall hung a framed blueprint of the Fremont Bridge, the first project I'd ever led. 1987. I was 33, the same age Nathan was now, and I'd stood on that construction site watching steel rise from the riverbed, knowing that what we built would carry people safely for 100 years. I sat at my desk and opened the fireproof safe beneath it. The combination was the same one I'd used for decades. Dorothy's birthday. March 22nd, 1955. Inside were my patent certificates, all 12 of them. Each one representing years of research, testing, and refinement. Load distribution algorithms, seismic dampening systems, cable tension optimization for suspension bridges. 37 years of royalties flowing from ideas I'd had while standing in the rain on construction sites, sketching on napkins, arguing with contractors about tolerances. $2.5 million in intellectual property. Combined with the house, the investment portfolio, and my pension, the total sat at $7.2 million. I spread the certificates across my desk and looked at them the way I used to look at bridge blueprints before a final inspection. Every detail mattered. Every connection point. Every load-bearing joint. Brooke had called my patents the golden ticket. She'd whispered it to my son while I washed dishes 10 feet away. She thought I was an old man, too lost in grief to notice. She thought the engineer who designed structures that withstood earthquakes and hurricanes couldn't detect a fracture in his own family. She was wrong. I returned the certificates to the safe, locked it, and sat back in my chair. Outside, the rain tapped steadily against the window. The drafting table beside me was empty. It had been empty since I retired, but for the first time in 3 years, I felt the familiar itch to design something. Not a bridge this time. Something else entirely. A structure designed not to connect, but to contain. To hold weight until the precise moment it needed to collapse. Engineers call it a controlled load test. You apply pressure incrementally, measure the response, identify the failure point. Then you know exactly how much force is needed to bring the whole thing down. I picked up my phone and texted Catherine. 1 sentence. When Marcus has results, call me first. She replied in 9 seconds. Understood. Marcus Cole didn't look like a private investigator. He looked like a high school football coach who'd aged into someone you'd trust with your life. Mid-50s. Broad shoulders. Gray crew cut. Hands that could palm a basketball. He wore a flannel shirt under a canvas jacket and carried a leather messenger bag that had seen better decades. When he shook my hand in Catherine's office on the second Monday of December, his grip was firm and measured. The grip of a man who'd spent 22 years on Portland police before going private. He sat down, unzipped the bag, and placed a folder on the table. Not thin. Not thick. Just enough to ruin everything I thought I knew about my daughter-in-law. I'll start with the short version, he said. Then we'll go through the details. Catherine leaned forward. Go ahead. Brooke Prescott was born Brooke Ann Callahan in Flagstaff, Arizona, in 1988. She graduated from Arizona State in 2012 with a paralegal certificate, not a law degree. She was hired by Whitmore and Grant in Phoenix that same year. Estate disputes, inheritance litigation, conservatorship cases. She worked there 5 years. I know this part, I said. Marcus looked at me evenly. You don't know why she left. He opened the folder and slid across a document. A formal complaint filed with the Arizona State Bar, dated March of 2017. The complaint alleged that Brooke Callahan had accessed confidential client financial records without authorization. Specifically, she'd copied asset inventories, trust documents, and account information belonging to elderly clients of the firm. 7 clients in total, all widowers. All over 65. She was building a database, Marcus said. Names, net worth, property holdings, family dynamics. The firm launched an internal investigation. Before they could terminate her formally, she resigned. No criminal charges were filed, because the firm didn't want the publicity. But her access was revoked the same day, and she was escorted out by security. Catherine tapped the complaint. And then what? Marcus slid over a second document. Marriage certificate. Brooke Ann Callahan married Richard James Emery on September 14, 2018, in Scottsdale, Arizona. I stared at the name. Richard Emery. I didn't know him. I'd never heard of him. Richard Emery was 74 years old at the time of the marriage, Marcus continued. Retired pharmaceutical executive. Widower. His wife had passed 18 months earlier from pancreatic cancer. Net worth approximately $1.2 million. He had one estranged daughter living in Colorado who hadn't spoken to him in 6 years. My throat tightened. An elderly widower. Recently lost his wife. Isolated from family. The description could have been written about me. The marriage lasted 22 months, Marcus said. During that time, Brooke gained access to his financial accounts. Convinced him to add her name to the deed of his home, and transferred approximately $380,000 into a separate account she controlled. She filed for divorce in July of 2020. The settlement gave her the money and a clean break. Richard kept the house, but lost nearly a third of his liquid assets. Marcus paused. He reached into the folder and pulled out a single sheet of paper. A death certificate. Richard Emery died on January 3, 2021. 6 months after the divorce was finalized. Cause of death listed as cardiac arrest. He was alone when it happened. His daughter found out 3 weeks later. The room was silent. I could hear the ventilation system humming in the ceiling. Catherine's pen had stopped moving. There's no evidence of foul play, Marcus said carefully. But the pattern is clear. She identified a vulnerable target, married into his life, extracted assets, and left before anyone noticed. Richard Emery's daughter tried to file a civil suit. But by then, Brooke had moved to Seattle, changed her name through the marriage to Prescott, and disappeared into a new life. When did she meet Nathan? I asked. Marcus checked his notes. Online dating application. March of 2019. They married June of that year. 3 months after meeting. 3 months. My son married a woman he'd known for 90 days. I'd spent longer deciding which steel alloy to use on a bridge deck. There's more, Marcus said. He pulled out a bank statement. Your son is in debt. Significant debt. He co-founded a tech startup in 2021 called Meridian Analytics. It failed within 14 months. Nathan personally guaranteed loans totaling $420,000. The company dissolved in 2022. The debt remains. $420,000. I repeated. Brooke manages their household finances, Marcus said. She controls the bank accounts, the credit cards, the budget. Nathan's name is on the debt, but she makes the decisions. He looked at me. Your son is financially underwater and married to a woman who knows exactly how to exploit that kind of pressure. Catherine spoke for the first time in several minutes. Marcus, what about the LLC? He nodded and pulled out the final document. 3 months ago, on August 15th, Brooke registered a limited liability company with the Oregon Secretary of State. The company name is Prescott Bridge Consulting. I felt the words hit me the way a shockwave hits a bridge during a seismic test. A deep, structural tremor that doesn't crack the surface, but shifts everything underneath. Prescott Bridge Consulting, I said slowly. That's my name. My work. Bridges. Marcus nodded. The LLC lists Brooke as sole managing member. She used this company to contact Patent Bridge Corporation, a licensing firm that manages patent portfolios. She identified herself as a representative of the Prescott family and requested preliminary valuation of your 12 patents. She was pricing my life's work. She was preparing to transfer it. Catherine corrected. Once she obtained power of attorney, she could legally reassign the licensing agreements from your name to the LLC. From there, all royalty income would flow directly to her. I sat back in my chair. The pieces fell together with the cold precision of a load calculation. The email Nathan sent wasn't a son setting a boundary. It was the opening move. Create distance. Make the old man feel abandoned. Then return with warmth and concern. Offer to help. Gain his trust. Gain legal authority over his finances. The email was phase 1. Thanksgiving was phase 2. And somewhere ahead, phase 3 was waiting. How long ago did she register the LLC? I asked. August 15th. Marcus repeated. 3 months before Nathan sent you that email. I looked at Catherine. She looked back at me. Neither of us needed to say it. The email wasn't the beginning. It was never the beginning. Brooke had been building this for months, studying my patents, creating a shell company, positioning herself as the solution to a problem she was manufacturing. My son was her access point. His debt was her leverage. And my grief, my loneliness, my desire to have my family back That was the crack in the foundation she planned to exploit. She made one mistake, I said quietly. Catherine raised an eyebrow. She assumed the old engineer wouldn't recognize a flawed design when he saw one. I always wondered why Nathan sent that email. Not a phone call, not a conversation over coffee, not even a text message. A cold, 6-sentence email on my 70th birthday. Now, sitting in my study at 11 at night with Marcus's folder spread across my desk, I understood. He didn't write it. She did. I called Catherine the next morning. She arrived at my house by 9, carrying her own folder and 2 cups of coffee from the place on Hawthorne that Dorothy used to love. She handed me one, sat across from me at the kitchen table, and opened her notes. I spent last night pulling apart that email, she said, word by word. And I want to show you something. She laid a printed copy of Nathan's email beside a legal brief Brooke had drafted during her time at Whitmore and Grant. Marcus had obtained it from a former colleague at the firm. The brief was a conservatorship petition filed on behalf of a 71-year-old client in Scottsdale. The language was clinical, precise, emotionally distant. I read them side by side. The sentence structures were nearly identical. Short declarative statements. No contractions. Formal tone with strategic emotional triggers placed at calculated intervals. Please don't expect me to be there when things get hard. That sentence didn't sound like my son. It sounded like a legal document designed to establish a paper trail. She coached him, I said. More than that, Catherine replied. She handed me another sheet. Marcus pulled the metadata from Nathan's email account. The email was composed on November 9th at 2:14 in the afternoon Pacific Time. Nathan was at work. His office is in downtown Seattle. But the device used to compose the email wasn't his work computer or his phone. Whose was it? Brooke's laptop. A MacBook Pro registered to Brooke Prescott. She either wrote it herself or dictated it while Nathan typed. Either way, she was in the room. I stared at the metadata printout. Device name: Brooke's MacBook Air. IP address traced to their apartment in Seattle. Timestamp: 2:14. Nathan's lunch break. She'd sat beside him, or across from him, and guided every word, every carefully placed knife. Catherine leaned back. Walter, this is a strategy I've seen before. It's called distance then reconcile. It's used in financial exploitation cases. The abuser creates deliberate emotional distance between the target and their family. A fight. A letter. A cruel statement. Something that causes real pain. Then, after the damage is done, they reverse course. They show up with warmth, concern, offers to help. The target is so relieved to have their family back that they don't question the sudden change. They're just grateful. The email was the distance, I said, and Thanksgiving was the reconcile. Catherine nodded. Next comes the ask. Power of attorney. Conservatorship. Financial access. By the time they ask, you're supposed to be so emotionally vulnerable that you'll sign anything just to keep them close. I thought about Brooke at my Thanksgiving table. Her cashmere sweater. Her calculated smile. The way she'd leaned forward and said, "We just want to help, Walter. Take some of the burden off your shoulders." Every word, a brick in a wall she was building around me. But then I thought about Nathan. My son. The boy who'd cried over a dead goldfish. The boy who'd told me at 7 he wanted to build bridges like his dad. Before Brooke, Nathan had been quiet, kind, a little lost after Dorothy's diagnosis, but fundamentally decent. He'd struggled with his mother's illness. I knew that. He'd pulled away not because he didn't care, but because watching Dorothy disappear had broken something inside him that he didn't know how to fix. Brooke had found that broken piece and used it. "Catherine," I said, "I need to see their communications, not just the email. Everything." She hesitated. "That's a legal gray area, Walter. We can't access their personal messages without cause. We have cause." She forged a company using my name. She's contacting patent licensing firms pretending to represent my family. That's fraud. Catherine considered this. Then she nodded. I'll file a motion for discovery. If a judge agrees there's probable cause for financial exploitation, we can subpoena their communications. In the meantime, Marcus has something else. She pulled out her phone and showed me a screenshot. A text message conversation between Brooke and someone listed in her contacts as Jen M. The messages were dated October of 2024, 1 month before Nathan's email. Brooke's message read, "The old man is lonely. Lost his wife 3 years ago. Classic profile. Isolated, emotional, desperate for family connection. Nathan is on board. He doesn't know the details, but he trusts me. Give me 6 months." Jen M. replied. Same playbook as Scottsdale? Brooke's response was one word. Upgraded. I read it 3 times. Classic profile. Isolated. Emotional. Desperate. She'd reduced me to a target assessment. The same way she'd reduced Richard Emery. The same way she'd probably reduced every elderly widower she'd studied at Whitmore and Grant. But one line burned deeper than the others. Nathan is on board. He doesn't know the details, but he trusts me. My son trusted her. That was the weapon. Not greed. Not malice. Trust. She had taken the one good thing left in Nathan, his capacity to believe in someone he loved, and she had turned it into a tool for theft. Catherine watched me read. She didn't speak. She knew me well enough to know that silence was what I needed. After a long moment, I set the phone down. My son didn't betray me because he wanted to, I said. He betrayed me because the woman he loved told him it was the right thing to do. Catherine nodded slowly. That's what makes this dangerous, Walter. A man who thinks he's doing wrong will hesitate. A man who believes he's doing right will never stop. I stood and walked to the window. Portland rain streaked the glass. Somewhere across town, Nathan was probably sitting in his apartment, believing he'd done the hard but necessary thing by sending that email, believing Brooke when she told him it was for the best, believing that his father was a stubborn old man who couldn't see reason. He had no idea he was married to a woman who had already planned every move from the first date to the last signature. And that understanding, that slow, terrible clarity, didn't make me less angry. It made me something worse. It made me sad, because the enemy wasn't my son. The enemy was the woman sleeping beside him. And to save him from her, I might have to destroy everything he believed was real. I turned from the window. What's our next move? Catherine gathered her papers. We wait for Marcus to confirm the Whitmore and Grant termination. We file for discovery on their communications. And we watch for Phase 3. What's Phase 3? She looked at me. The doctor's appointment. If she follows the Scottsdale playbook, she'll try to get you declared cognitively impaired. That gives them grounds for conservatorship. Once they have conservatorship, they control everything. When? Soon, Catherine said. She's already laid the groundwork. The email established that you're difficult and irrational. Thanksgiving established that they're concerned and involved. The next step is medical documentation. I nodded. Then we'll be ready. Catherine paused at the door. Walter, when this is over, Nathan is going to need you. Not the engineer. The father. I know, I said. That's the part I haven't figured out yet. Phase 3 arrived on a Tuesday morning in the second week of January, exactly when Catherine predicted. My phone rang at 8:15. Brooke's name on the screen. She never called me directly. In 5 years of marriage to my son, she had called me exactly twice, both times to confirm holiday logistics. This was different. Walter. Hi. Her voice was warm, almost tender. A tone I'd never heard her use with me before. Listen, Nathan and I have been talking, and we're a little worried about you. Living alone. Managing everything by yourself. We just want to make sure you're okay. Physically and, mentally. There it was. Mentally. We found a wonderful doctor, she continued. A cognitive specialist. Dr. Alan Mercer. We thought a checkup would be a good idea, just for peace of mind. That sounds reasonable, I said. When? She'd already booked it. Thursday at 2. I hung up and called Catherine. Phase 3, I said. Don't cancel, she replied. Go. Answer every question honestly. Don't play confused, don't give them anything, and pay attention to everything. The questions, the forms on his desk. How Brooke interacts with him. Take your phone. Record if you can. Thursday came cold and sharp. Brooke arrived in a black SUV. Nathan sat in the passenger seat. He didn't look at me when I climbed in. His knee bounced the entire drive. He stared out the window at nothing. Dr. Mercer's office was in a single-story medical building in Tigard, 15 minutes south of Portland. Beige walls, fluorescent lights, the kind of antiseptic quiet that makes your skin crawl. The receptionist smiled at Brooke by name. Hi, Brooke. Dr. Mercer is ready for you. By name. They knew each other. She didn't greet me or Nathan. Just Brooke. I filed that detail. Dr. Mercer was a thin man in his early 50s with wireframe glasses and a smile that was professionally warm but personally empty. The kind of smile you see on men who've learned to perform compassion as a service. Mr. Prescott, please sit down. Your family has asked me to conduct a brief cognitive evaluation. Just some standard questions. Brooke pulled a chair to the side, positioned behind me. She wanted to see the doctor's face without me seeing hers. Nathan stood by the door, arms crossed, staring at the floor. The questions began. Today's date. The current president. Count backward from 100 by sevens. Name 3 objects and recall them in 5 minutes. Draw a clock face showing 2:45. I answered everyone correctly and without hesitation. Then the questions shifted. Mr. Prescott, have you experienced any confusion recently? Forgetting keys? Getting lost on familiar routes? No. Mood changes? Irritability? Paranoia? Feelings that people are working against you? The question was loaded. If I said yes, he'd note paranoid ideation. If I described what Brooke was actually doing, it would sound exactly like paranoia to anyone who didn't know the truth. No, I said calmly. I've been feeling quite well. Brooke shifted behind me. Her chair creaked. Dr. Mercer leaned forward. Your daughter-in-law mentioned you've been making unusual financial decisions recently. Refusing help. Isolating yourself. Becoming rigid about estate planning. Does that sound accurate? I turned and looked at Brooke. She met my gaze with rehearsed concern. Eyebrows slightly raised. Lips pressed together. A perfect performance. I turned back. I manage my finances the way I've managed them for 40 years. I don't consider that unusual. Of course, he said. But sometimes as we age, we don't recognize changes in ourselves. He wrote for a long time. Too long for the answers I'd given. I watched his pen move and realized he wasn't recording my responses. He was composing a narrative, one that had been outlined before I walked through the door. Then I saw it. On the left side of his desk, partially hidden beneath a manila folder, the corner of a document peeked out. Blue paper. Legal size. I recognized the format immediately. I'd seen one 3 years ago when Catherine helped me with Dorothy's medical power of attorney. A petition for conservatorship. Pre-printed form. State of Oregon header. In the field, labeled Proposed Conservator. 2 words, written in blue ink. Even upside down and from 4 feet away, I could read them. Nathan Prescott. They'd filled it out before the exam. Before a single question was asked. Before Dr. Mercer had any clinical basis for determining anything about my cognitive state. The petition was ready. The conclusion predetermined. This appointment wasn't an evaluation. It was a formality designed to rubber stamp a decision made weeks ago. I completed the remaining questions with steady calm. Recalled the objects. Answered follow-ups about sleep and appetite. I gave him nothing. Not a single hesitation. Not a single inconsistency. Not a single crack. Dr. Mercer closed his folder. Thank you, Mr. Prescott. I'll have results within a week. Your family clearly cares about you very much. I shook his hand. Thank you, Doctor. Brooke extended her hand next. They shook with the easy familiarity of people who'd already discussed the outcome. Thank you so much, Doctor. We feel so much better knowing Dad is in good hands. Dad. She'd never called me that before. I walked out ahead of them into the January air. At the far end of the parking lot, I found Dr. Mercer's car. Silver, Lexus. Oregon. Plates. I pulled out my phone, photographed the license plate, and texted Catherine 5 words. Run this, Doctor. Everything. She replied in 11 seconds. Already started. I climbed back into Brooke's SUV. She watched me in the rearview mirror. How do you think it went? She asked. Very informative, I said. I learned a great deal. She smiled, satisfied. We just want what's best for you, Walter. I looked out the window as we pulled onto the highway. The rain had stopped, for the first time in weeks. A thin line of sunlight broke through the clouds over the West Hills. They thought the test was for me. They had no idea I was the one conducting the evaluation. And Dr. Mercer, with his pre-filled petition and his loaded questions, had just become the most important piece of evidence in a case he didn't know existed. Catherine called at 6 in the morning. She never called before 8, unless something was on fire. Walter, she said. They've already started moving your money. I was standing in my kitchen. Coffee half poured. The pot froze in my hand. What do you mean, moving? Can you be at my office by 8? I was there by 7:45. Marcus was already seated, his messenger bag open. 3 folders spread across the conference table. Catherine stood at the window, phone in hand, finishing a call. She hung up when I walked in and sat down without pleasantries. Marcus, she said. Show him. He opened the first folder and slid a bank statement across the table. Chase Bank. Joint checking account. The names listed at the top read Walter Prescott and Nathan Prescott. I don't have a joint account with Nathan, I said. You do now. Marcus replied. Opened on December 2nd, 2024. 6 days after Thanksgiving. Initial deposit, $45,000. Transferred from an account held by Prescott Bridge Consulting, the LLC Brooke registered in August. I stared at the statement. My name, my social security number, Nathan's name beside it. A signature at the bottom that was close to mine but not mine. The slant was wrong. The pressure was too light. Whoever forged it had practiced, but they hadn't studied the way an engineer signs his name. We press hard. We commit. She forged my signature, I said. And your social security number, Catherine added. She filed for the account online, using a scanned copy of your driver's license. Marcus found the scan on the LLC's cloud storage. She'd photographed your wallet during Thanksgiving. I thought about Brooke at my dining table. Her cashmere sweater, her warm smile. While I was carving turkey, she was photographing the contents of my wallet. While Emma was drawing bridges, Brooke was building a paper trail designed to steal my life's work. Catherine opened the second folder. Now, the doctor, Marcus spoke. Dr. Alan Mercer, age 52. Licensed clinical psychologist, private practice in Tigard. On the surface, everything checks out. Board certified, no malpractice suits, decent reputation. But I dug deeper. He pulled out 3 documents. Court filings from Multnomah County and Clark County, Washington. In 2021, Dr. Mercer provided a cognitive evaluation for a conservatorship case involving Helen Whitaker, age 78, of Portland. His report concluded severe cognitive decline, requiring immediate conservatorship. The proposed conservator was her nephew, David Whitaker. 6 months after conservatorship was granted, David had liquidated $230,000 from Helen's accounts. Helen's church pastor filed a complaint, and a second independent evaluation found Helen to be fully competent. The conservatorship was overturned, but the money was gone. David disappeared. Dr. Mercer was never investigated. Marcus laid down the second filing. In 2022, Dr. Mercer evaluated Gerald Simmons, age 81, of Vancouver, Washington. Same result. Severe cognitive impairment. Conservatorship granted to a caretaker named Rita Vasquez. Within 4 months, $160,000 transferred out of Gerald's estate. Gerald's daughter contested. A second evaluation contradicted Mercer's findings. By then, Rita had relocated to Nevada. The third case, Marcus continued. 2023. Portland again. Margaret Chen, age 75. Same pattern. Mercer's evaluation. Conservatorship. Financial drain. This one is still in litigation. 3 cases, I said. 3 elderly people. 3 fraudulent evaluations. Catherine leaned forward. And in none of these cases was Dr. Mercer formally disciplined. The complaints were filed, but the Oregon Medical Board moved slowly. His license is still active. How does Brooke know him? I asked. Marcus pulled out a phone record. Brooke's cell phone shows 17 calls to Dr. Mercer's office between October and January. The first call was October 3rd, 6 weeks before Nathan's email. She also made a direct payment of $8,500 to Mercer's practice from the Prescott Bridge Consulting account on December 20th, 14 days before your appointment. She paid him, I said. She retained him, Catherine corrected. That payment wasn't for a medical evaluation. It was a consulting fee. She hired him to produce a specific result. The room was quiet, except for the hum of the heating vent. I looked at the documents spread across the table. Forged signatures. A fraudulent bank account. A paid-off doctor. 3 prior victims. And behind all of it, a woman who had studied the mechanics of elder exploitation the way I'd studied the mechanics of steel under stress. There's one more thing, Marcus said. He opened the third folder and placed a single printed email on the table. Sent from Patten Bridge Corporation to Brooke at the Prescott Bridge Consulting email address. Dated October 26th, 2024. 2 weeks before Nathan's email to me, I read it. Dear Miss Prescott, thank you for your inquiry regarding the Prescott Structural Engineering patent portfolio. We have completed our preliminary valuation. Based on current licensing agreements and projected royalty income, the portfolio's estimated market value is $2.7 million. We are prepared to proceed with the licensing transfer once we receive the power of attorney documentation. Please advise on timeline. $2.7 million, I said slowly. They valued my patents at $2.7 million, and they were ready to transfer the moment Brooke produced power of attorney, Catherine said. Which is exactly what the conservatorship would give her. Nathan would be named conservator on paper, but Brooke would control every decision. The patents would move from your name to the LLC. The royalties would flow directly to her. I sat back in my chair. The full picture assembled itself with the precision of a structural analysis. Every beam, every joint, every load path. October. Brooke contacts Patten Bridge, gets the valuation. She contacts Dr. Mercer, retains him for a future evaluation. She registers the LLC. She photographs my wallet at Thanksgiving, November. She coaches Nathan to send the email, creates distance, then reverses course, shows up with flowers and concern. Begins phase 2, January. The doctor's appointment. The rigged evaluation. The pre-filled conservatorship petition. Phase 3. And waiting beyond that. Phase 4. Power of attorney. Patent transfer. $2.7 million flowing out of my name and into hers. Every step planned months in advance. Every move rehearsed. My son was her vehicle. My grief was her entry point. And my patents, 37 years of engineering innovation, were the prize. She'd designed the whole thing like a blueprint. Clean lines, logical sequence, load-bearing structure, but she'd made one critical error in her calculations. She'd assumed the foundation would hold. She'd assumed the old man at the center of her blueprint was too weak, too lonely, too broken to push back. She forgot that I'd spent my career testing structures to their breaking point. And now I knew exactly where hers would fail. I spent 40 years designing structures that could withstand earthquakes, hurricanes, and the slow erosion of time. Building a trap for my own daughter-in-law required a different kind of engineering, but the principles were the same. Load, stress, breaking point. On the third Saturday of January, Catherine, Marcus, and I sat in my study, with the door locked and the curtains drawn. Catherine had a legal pad filled with notes. Marcus had his laptop open. I had a cup of cold coffee and a decision to make. "We have enough," Catherine said. Forged bank account. Fraudulent LLC. A paid-off doctor, with 3 prior victims. The Patent Bridge email proves premeditation. We could go to the district attorney tomorrow, and Brooke would be arrested within a week. But I said, but Nathan would claim ignorance. And a jury might believe him. He'd say Brooke handled the finances. He didn't know about the LLC or the forged signature. He thought the doctor's appointment was genuine concern. Without direct evidence that Nathan participated knowingly, Brooke's lawyer could argue she acted alone and Nathan was an innocent spouse. She'd take the fall alone, Marcus added, and Nathan would walk. With potential grounds to contest any changes you make to your estate. Catherine nodded. If we want this airtight, we need them both in the room. We need Brooke to reveal the plan in Nathan's presence. We need Nathan to hear it directly. On record. With no room for deniability. I understood. This wasn't just about prosecution. This was about my son. If I went to the police now, Nathan would spend the rest of his life believing I'd overreacted, believing Brooke had only been trying to help, believing his father had destroyed his marriage over a misunderstanding. He had to hear the truth from her own mouth. Otherwise, I'd win the legal battle and lose my son forever. What do you need me to do? I asked. Catherine set down her pen. Call Nathan. Tell him you've been thinking about the future. Tell him the doctor's appointment opened your eyes. Tell him you're ready to sign the power of attorney. My stomach turned. You want me to invite them into my house and pretend I'm surrendering. I want you to give Brooke exactly what she's been waiting for, Catherine said. The moment she thinks she's won, she'll stop being careful. And that's when we get everything on record. I looked at Marcus. Can you wire the house? He nodded. 4 cameras. 2 audio recorders. Living room. Study. Hallway. And front porch. I'll have it installed by Thursday morning. Everything feeds to a secure laptop. Catherine and I will monitor from the basement in real time. And the district attorney? I asked. Catherine opened her briefcase and pulled out a letter on official stationery. Assistant DA, Karen Nakamura. She's reviewed our evidence. She's authorized a controlled operation. If Brooke presents forged documents or discusses the conservatorship plan on camera, Nakamura will issue an arrest warrant within the hour. Portland police will be staged 2 blocks away. I leaned back in my chair. The study felt smaller than usual. The bookshelves pressed in. The framed blueprint of the Fremont Bridge hung on the wall behind Marcus, the first structure I'd ever built. I'd been 33 then. Confident, certain that if I designed something correctly, it would stand. Now I was 70. Sitting in a room with a lawyer and a private investigator, designing something meant to collapse. When? I asked. Catherine and Marcus exchanged a glance. Next Saturday, Catherine said. February 1st. Invite them for lunch. Tell Nathan you want to discuss estate planning. Tell him to bring Brooke. She'll make sure he comes. I picked up my phone. The weight of it felt wrong. Too light for what it was about to do. I found Nathan's number and pressed call. He answered on the fourth ring. "Dad." His voice carried surprise and something else. "Caution, Nathan," I said. "I've been doing a lot of thinking since the doctor's appointment. You and Brooke were right. I need help managing things. I'm not as sharp as I used to be." The lie tasted like rust on my tongue. Nathan was quiet for a moment. "Then, really? You mean that?" "I do. I'd like to sit down with you and Brooke. Talk about power of attorney, estate planning, the practical things. Can you come Saturday?" "Noon." Another pause. Longer. I heard muffled voices. Brooke's voice in the background, rapid and low. Then Nathan again, brighter this time. "Yeah, Dad. We'll be there." "That's great. That's really great. I'm glad you're coming around." "Me too, son." "Me too." I hung up. My hand was steady. My heart was not. Catherine stood. "I'll prepare the new will tonight." She looked at me. "Do you want to review the terms?" I already knew them. I'd been thinking about nothing else for 3 weeks. The 12 patents, all of them, would transfer into a charitable foundation. The Dorothy Prescott STEM Foundation. Endowed permanently. Scholarships for engineering students at Portland State University. Dorothy had always wanted to fund education. She'd talked about it in the years before the diagnosis took her words away. This was her legacy. Not mine. The house, the investment portfolio, and all remaining assets would enter an irrevocable trust for Emma and Lucas. Nathan would not serve as trustee. An independent fiduciary appointed by Catherine would manage the funds until both children reached 25. Nathan could apply to rejoin the trust as a beneficiary, but only after meeting specific conditions. Completion of a financial counseling program. Full repayment of his debts. 1 year of documented therapy, and a written acknowledgement of what had happened, not punishment. Structure. The kind of framework that holds weight only if every connection is honest. Catherine gathered her papers. Marcus began packing his bag. At the door, Marcus turned. "Walter, when they walk in Saturday, Brooke is going to have documents ready. Power of attorney forms. Maybe conservatorship papers. She'll push to sign fast. She'll use emotion, urgency, guilt. That's her playbook. Let her talk. Let her present everything. The more she says on camera, the stronger the case." I nodded. "And Nathan?" Marcus added. "Quieter now. He's going to be in that room when it all comes apart. Are you ready for that?" I thought about my son at 7 years old, standing on the Fremont Bridge during a hard hat tour, looking up at the cables and asking, "Dad, how does it stay up?" I'd knelt beside him and said, "Because every piece trusts the other pieces to hold." "I'll be ready," I said. After they left, I sat alone in the study. The house settled into silence around me. I walked to the mantel and picked up the photograph of Dorothy. Our wedding day, 1983. She wore white. I wore a tie I'd knotted wrong 3 times before she fixed it for me. "I'm about to break apart our son's life," I told her. "Everything he thinks is real. His marriage. His wife. The future he planned." The photograph didn't answer. Photographs never do. But I heard her voice anyway, the way I always did when the house was quiet enough. The voice she'd had before the disease. Clear and certain. "You're not breaking anything, Walter. You're showing him what's already broken. There's a difference." I set the photograph down and turned off the desk lamp. Saturday was 6 days away. The cameras would be installed by Thursday. The new will would be signed by Friday. And on Saturday afternoon, Brooke Prescott would walk through my front door for the last time, carrying documents that would seal her own conviction. 6 days. I'd waited longer for concrete to cure. "Before we go any further, I want to ask you something. After everything you've heard, after the forged signatures, the fake doctor, the shell company built on my name. Do you think Brooke deserves a second chance? Or does she deserve exactly what's coming? Drop mercy or justice in the comments. I want to see where you stand. Also, a quick note. What follows includes some dramatized elements for reflection and storytelling purposes. But the message at the heart of this story is very real. If you're invested in this family's journey, stay with me. Because what happened next in my living room on that Saturday afternoon changed everything. Saturday, February 1st. I woke at 5:30. Same as always. The house was silent. The cameras were in place. 4 lenses, each no larger than a coat button, mounted in corners and behind frames. 2 audio recorders, one in the living room ceiling vent, one beneath the coffee table. Everything fed to Marcus's laptop in the basement, where he and Catherine would watch in real time. I showered, shaved, put on a clean button-down shirt and khaki pants. The kind of clothes a man wears when he's trying to look comfortable, approachable, cooperative. I combed my hair, checked the bandage over a small cut on my hand from slicing bread the night before, and walked downstairs. At 10, Catherine arrived through the back door. She carried her briefcase and a sealed manila envelope containing the new will. She went straight to the basement, without a word. Marcus was already there, laptop open, 4 feeds glowing on the screen. Living room, study, hallway, front porch. At 11:15, my phone buzzed. Nathan. We're leaving Seattle now. Should be there by noon. Can't wait, Dad. I typed back. Looking forward to it, son. Drive safe. At 11:45, I set the dining table. 2 place settings for Nathan and Brooke. 1 for me. I put out coffee, a plate of sandwiches, and a bowl of fruit. Normal. Domestic. The kind of table a cooperative old man sets when he's ready to hand over his life. At noon exactly, a silver Honda Accord pulled into my driveway. I watched from the living room window. Brooke stepped out first. Passenger side. She wore a navy blazer over a white blouse, professional, composed, dressed for a closing. Nathan emerged from the driver's side in a wrinkled button-down, no jacket. He looked like he'd barely slept. His hair was uncombed. His movements were stiff, mechanical. Like a man walking towards something he didn't fully understand but couldn't stop. Brooke smoothed her blazer, adjusted her hair in the side mirror, and picked up a leather portfolio from the back seat. She held it against her chest, the way a lawyer holds a case file, walking into court. They approached the front door together. Brooke slightly ahead, Nathan half a step behind. She knocked twice, firm and precise. I opened the door. Walter. Brooke's smile was radiant. Perfectly practiced. Thank you so much for doing this. It means the world to us. Nathan stepped forward. His hug was brief and tight. Too tight. The hug of a man who feels guilty but doesn't know why. Hey, Dad. Come in, I said. I made coffee. We sat at the dining table. Brooke placed the leather portfolio in front of her. Unopened. She sipped her coffee, complimented the sandwiches, and asked about my week with the easy warmth of a woman visiting her beloved father-in-law. Nathan ate a sandwich without tasting it. His eyes moved between Brooke and me, reading the room the way a child reads the space between arguing parents. So, Brooke said, setting down her cup. Shall we get started? Of course, I said. She unzipped the portfolio and removed a stack of documents, neatly organized, color-coded tabs, professional binding. She'd prepared this the way a deal team prepares a merger package, every page designed to move toward one outcome. She slid the first document across the table. This is a healthcare directive, she said. It names Nathan as your primary healthcare agent. Standard stuff. It just means, if something happens, Nathan can make medical decisions on your behalf. I picked up the document. 7 pages. I read slowly, the way an engineer reads a spec sheet, word by word, line by line. Brooke watched me, her smile fixed. Nathan sat beside her, hands folded. Page 1 was indeed a healthcare directive. Standard language. Reasonable provisions. But on page 4, the language shifted. I noticed it the way you notice a hairline crack in a load-bearing wall. Small. Easy to miss. Devastating if ignored. Section 4.3. The undersigned hereby grants the designated agent full authority to manage financial accounts, real property, intellectual property, and all investment instruments on behalf of the principal, effective immediately upon execution of this document. Financial accounts. Real property. Intellectual property. This wasn't a healthcare directive. It was a financial power of attorney, disguised as one. Buried on page 4, wrapped in medical language, designed to slip past anyone who didn't read every word. I kept my face neutral. Turned to page 5. More financial language hidden beneath clinical terms. Page 6 contained a clause granting the agent authority to modify, transfer, or reassign patent licensing agreements held by the principal. There it was. The entire point. 12 patents. $2.7 million. One signature away from Brooke's control. I looked up. Brooke held my gaze, her expression soft, encouraging. Nathan stared at the table. "This looks thorough," I said calmly. Brooke's smile widened. "We worked with a wonderful attorney. Very detail-oriented." I picked up the pen she'd placed beside the document. A heavy silver ballpoint. Expensive. The kind of pen you give someone when you want the signing to feel ceremonial. I held it between my fingers, feeling its weight. Then I set it down. "Before I sign," I said, "there's something I'd like to read." Brooke's smile flickered. Just for a moment. A micro-expression. There and gone. Like a voltage spike on a monitor. "Read?" she said. "What do you mean?" Nathan looked up. I pushed my chair back and stood. I walked to the hallway door, opened it, and stepped aside. Catherine Ellis walked into the dining room. She wore a charcoal suit and carried a folder. Her reading glasses hung from a chain around her neck. She moved with the measured calm of a woman who had done this before and knew exactly how it would end. "Good afternoon," she said. She pulled out the chair at the head of the table, sat down, and opened her folder. "My name is Catherine Ellis. I'm Mr. Prescott's attorney and the executor of his estate." Brooke's smile froze. Her hand moved instinctively toward the portfolio, as if to close it. Nathan's hand stopped halfway to his coffee cup. His face went pale. Catherine placed her reading glasses on her nose, looked down at the document before her, and began. "Mr. Prescott has asked me to read the following in the presence of both parties." She turned to the first page. The room was silent except for the soft hum of the heating vent, and if you knew where to listen, the faint electronic pulse of 4 cameras recording every word. Catherine read slowly. Every word measured. Every pause deliberate. "On this first day of February, 2025, I, Walter James Prescott, being of sound mind and clear judgment, hereby revoke all prior wills, trusts, and estate designations. The following represents my final and binding testament." Brooke's hand moved to the portfolio. Her fingers pressed against the leather. Knuckles, whitening. "Article 1, Catherine continued. All intellectual property held by Walter James Prescott, including 12 United States patents related to structural engineering innovations, along with all current and future royalty income derived from said patents, shall be transferred in their entirety to the Dorothy Prescott STEM Foundation, a charitable organization established for the purpose of funding engineering scholarships at Portland State University. Nathan blinked. His lips parted, but no sound came out. Article 2. The residential property located at 7412 Northwest Westover Road, Portland, Oregon, along with all financial assets, investment accounts, and retirement instruments, shall be placed into an irrevocable trust for the sole benefit of Emma Grace Prescott and Lucas Daniel Prescott, grandchildren of the testator. The trust shall be administered by an independent fiduciary appointed by Catherine Ellis, Attorney at law. Nathan David Prescott shall not serve as trustee and shall have no administrative authority over trust assets. Nathan's face went white. Dad, what is this? I didn't answer. Catherine continued. Article 3. Nathan David Prescott is hereby removed as beneficiary from this estate. Reinstatement, as a secondary beneficiary, may be considered upon satisfaction of the following conditions: completion of a certified financial counseling program, full repayment of outstanding personal debts, 12 consecutive months of documented therapeutic treatment, and a written acknowledgement of the events described in the attached evidentiary file. Brooke stood. Her chair scraped against the hardwood. "This is ridiculous," she said. Her voice was sharp, controlled, but I could hear the fracture beneath it. "You can't do this. Nathan is your son. You can't just cut him out." I looked at her. "Sit down, Brooke." She didn't sit. "My husband has every right to his father's estate. This is coercion. You're being manipulated by your lawyer." Catherine removed her glasses and set them on the table. "Mrs. Prescott, please sit down. There's more." Brooke looked at Nathan. Nathan stared at the table, motionless. Catherine opened a second folder. This one was thicker. She spread its contents across the table, the way Marcus had spread them across hers 3 weeks earlier. One document at a time. On August 15th of last year, she began. A limited liability company called Prescott Bridge Consulting was registered with the Oregon Secretary of State. The sole managing member is Brooke Ann Prescott, formerly Brooke Ann Callahan. Nathan looked at Brooke. "What?" Brooke's jaw tightened. "That's a business project. It has nothing to do with this." Catherine continued. "This LLC contacted Patent Bridge Corporation on October 26th, identifying itself as a representative of the Prescott family. Patent Bridge responded with a preliminary valuation of Walter Prescott's patent portfolio at $2.7 million and confirmed readiness to transfer licensing agreements upon receipt of power of attorney documentation." She slid the email across the table. Nathan picked it up. His hands trembled. "On December 2nd, Catherine said, a joint checking account was opened at Chase Bank in the names of Walter Prescott and Nathan Prescott. The account was created using a forged signature and a scanned copy of Walter's driver's license. $45,000 was deposited from the Prescott Bridge Consulting account." She placed the bank statement beside the email. The forged signature next to my real one. Even Nathan could see the difference. "I didn't open this account," Nathan said quietly. "I've never seen this." "No," Catherine replied. "You didn't. Your wife did." Brooke's composure cracked. "That's a lie. You have no proof of any of this. You're an old man with a paranoid lawyer inventing conspiracies." Catherine pulled out another document. "Dr. Alan Mercer," she said evenly. "Clinical psychologist in Tigard. Retained by Mrs. Prescott on December 20th for a fee of $8,500, paid from the Prescott Bridge Consulting account. Dr. Mercer conducted a cognitive evaluation of Mr. Prescott on January 9th. Before the evaluation began, a completed petition for conservatorship naming Nathan Prescott as proposed conservator was already on doctor before the evaluation began. Mercer's desk. Nathan stood. His chair fell backward. "What?" He turned to Brooke. "You told me the appointment was just a checkup. You said you were worried about him." Brooke's face shifted, the mask slipping. "I was worried about him, Nathan. Everything she's saying is taken out of context." Catherine wasn't finished. "Dr. Mercer has provided fraudulent cognitive evaluations in 3 prior conservatorship cases. Helen Whitaker, $230,000 stolen. Gerald Simmons, $160,000. Margaret Chen, currently in litigation. The Oregon Medical Board has been notified. Dr. Mercer's license is under review." Brooke's voice rose. "You can't prove I had anything to do with those cases." Catherine opened her laptop. The screen faced Brooke and Nathan. She pressed play. The video was from Marcus's hidden camera at Dr. Mercer's office. Marcus had placed it during a preliminary visit disguised as a new patient consultation the week before my appointment. The footage showed Brooke sitting across from Dr. Mercer in his office. Her voice was clear. "I need the evaluation to show cognitive decline. Enough to support a conservatorship petition. The old man is sharp, so you'll need to frame the questions carefully. Focus on paranoia, rigidity, impaired judgment. I'll handle the rest." Dr. Mercer nodded on screen. "Same arrangement as the others?" "Same arrangement," Brooke replied. 8,500. Half now, half after the petition is filed. The video ended. The room was silent. Nathan stared at the screen. His mouth moved, but nothing came out. Then he turned to Brooke. "You paid him," Nathan whispered. "You paid a doctor to say my father was losing his mind." Brooke took a step backward. "Nathan, listen to me. I did this for us. For our family. Your father is sitting on $7 million, and he won't share a penny. Someone had to take action. By forging his signature?" Nathan's voice cracked. "By hiring a fake doctor? By building a company behind my back using his name? It wasn't like that. Then what was it like, Brooke? Because from where I'm standing, it looks like you married me to rob my father." The words hung in the air between them. Raw. Irreversible. Brooke opened her mouth. Closed it. For the first time since I'd known her, she had no prepared response. No rehearsed line. No calculated smile. Just silence. I watched my son. His face moved through stages I recognized because I'd felt them all myself over the past 3 months. Confusion. Disbelief. Horror. And then, slowly, the worst one. Understanding. The moment when every memory reshapes itself. Every conversation replays with new meaning. Every "I love you" becomes a transaction. Nathan sank into his chair. He put his hands over his face. His shoulders shook. "Dad," he said through his fingers. His voice was small, broken. The voice of a boy, not a man. "What have I done?" I didn't answer. Not because I didn't have words, but because the answer was something he'd need to find himself. And that journey had only just begun. Brooke moved first. She grabbed her portfolio off the table, snatched her purse from the chair, and turned for the front door in one fluid motion. The movement was fast, practiced, the instinct of a woman who had exited bad situations before. Phoenix, Scottsdale, Richard Emery's house. She knew when a room had turned against her, and she knew how to leave. She made it 4 steps. Marcus Cole stepped out of the hallway. He filled the doorframe the way a retaining wall fills a gap. Broad shoulders, steady eyes, one hand raised, palm open. "Mrs. Prescott," he said calmly, "I'd recommend you stay." Brooke stopped. Her eyes darted from Marcus to the front door, calculating distance. Then she heard the sirens. They were faint at first. The way Portland sirens always sound in the rain, distant, muffled, but growing. 2 cars, maybe 3, coming fast. Through the living room window, I saw the first patrol car turn onto my street. Then, a second. They parked at the curb, no lights flashing. But the officers moved quickly, 4 of them, uniformed, crossing my front lawn in formation. Catherine had already opened the door. "Officer," she said. "Catherine Ellis, attorney for Mr. Prescott. Assistant DA Karen Nakamura has authorized a controlled operation. The subjects are inside." The lead officer nodded. He was tall, mid-40s, with a shaved head and the calm efficiency of someone who'd done this many times. He stepped inside, followed by his partner. Brooke stood frozen between Marcus and the officers. Her portfolio hung loose in her hand. Her blazer was crooked. For the first time since I'd known her, she looked exactly like what she was. Cornered. Brooke Ann Prescott, the officer said. You are under arrest for forgery, financial fraud, identity theft, and conspiracy to commit elder financial exploitation. You have the right to remain silent. Anything you say can and will be used against you in a court of law. You have the right to an attorney. If you cannot afford one will be appointed for you. He continued the Miranda warning. Brooke didn't resist. She didn't scream. She didn't argue. She stood perfectly still, staring straight ahead as the officer placed the handcuffs around her wrists. The metal clicked twice. Quiet. Final. Nathan watched from the dining table. He hadn't moved since his collapse. His hands were still over his face. When the handcuffs clicked, he looked up. His eyes were red and wet. Brooke, he said. She didn't turn around. The officers guided her toward the front door. As she passed me, she stopped. Not because the officers let her, because she planted her feet and looked directly into my eyes. You think you've won, she said. Her voice was low, controlled, but the edge was gone. You haven't. Nathan will never forgive you for this. I held her gaze. I said nothing. There was nothing to say to a woman who still believed she could manipulate the room even in handcuffs. The officers moved her through the door and down the porch steps. I watched through the window as they placed her in the back of the patrol car. She sat straight, face forward, expression blank, a woman already rehearsing her next performance. Catherine touched my arm. Walter. She held out a sealed envelope. White. Legal size. My law firm's letterhead embossed in the corner. This is for Nathan. I took it. The lawyer's letter. The document referenced in every conversation, every strategy session, every late-night planning meeting over the past 2 months. Not a weapon. A mirror. Designed to show my son exactly what had been done to him and exactly what it would take to come back. I walked to the dining table where Nathan still sat, shoulders bent, staring at nothing. I placed the envelope in front of him. Read this, I said gently. Not now. When you're ready. But read every word. He picked it up, turned it over in his hands. His fingers were shaking. He opened the seal slowly and pulled out 7 pages. I watched his eyes move across the first page. The summary of Brooke's background. Brooke Callahan, Whitmore and Grant. The termination. The 7 elderly clients whose files she'd stolen. He turned to the second page. Richard Emery, 74. Scottsdale, $380,000. Dead 6 months after the divorce. Nathan's jaw clenched. Third page. The LLC, Prescott Bridge Consulting. Registered 3 months before the email. Patent Bridge Corporation, $2.7 million. In patent valuation. Ready to transfer upon receipt of power of attorney. Fourth page. The forged bank account. His name beside mine. A signature that wasn't mine. $45,000. Laundered through a shell company. Built on my identity. Fifth page. Dr. Mercer. $8,500. 3 prior victims. The pre-filled conservatorship petition with Nathan's name. Sixth page. The conditions for reinstatement. Financial counseling. Debt repayment. Therapy. Written acknowledgement. Seventh page. A single paragraph. My words, written at 2 a.m. the night before, sitting in Dorothy's chair. Nathan. You are my son. Nothing that has happened changes that. I don't believe you knew the full scope of what your wife was planning, but I believe you chose not to ask questions when the answers might have been uncomfortable. That is something you will need to reckon with. I love you. I have always loved you. And when you are ready to rebuild, I will be here. Not because you deserve it, but because that's what fathers do. Nathan read that paragraph 3 times. I know, because I counted. His lips moved silently over the words the way mine had moved over his email 3 months ago. The symmetry was not lost on me. He set the letter down, stood slowly, looked at me with eyes that held something I hadn't seen since he was 12 years old, and broke his mother's favorite vase. Guilt. Raw, unprocessed, total. He walked past me without speaking. Through the living room, past Catherine, who stepped aside, past Marcus, who lowered his eyes, through the front door, onto the porch. The February air was cold and damp. The patrol cars had gone. The street was empty. Brooke was gone. The driveway held only Nathan's silver Honda, and a silence so heavy it pressed against the walls. Nathan stopped at the edge of the porch. The same porch where Dorothy used to sit and watch the rain. The same porch where I'd carried him as a baby, where he'd taken his first steps holding my fingers, where he'd stood at 17 and told me he'd gotten into the University of Washington, and I'd hugged him so hard, he laughed. His knees buckled. He went down slowly. Not dramatically. Not like a man performing grief. He simply folded. His hands hit the wet wood first, then his knees. His head dropped. His shoulders shook. "I'm sorry, Dad." His voice broke on every word. "I'm so sorry. I didn't know. I swear, I didn't know." I stood in the doorway. My hand gripped the frame. Every instinct told me to go to him, to kneel beside him, to hold him the way I'd held him when he was small. And the world was something I could protect him from, but I didn't. Not yet. Not because I didn't love him. I loved him more in that moment than I had in years, but because he needed to feel this. The full weight of what had almost happened. The full cost of the questions he never asked. If I rushed to comfort him now, the lesson would dissolve into relief. And relief without understanding is just another way of forgetting. So I stood there. My son on his knees on his mother's porch. The rain beginning again. Soft and steady. The way Portland grieves. And I waited for him to find the strength to stand. The next 72 hours moved with the precision of a controlled demolition. One by one, every piece of Brooke's carefully constructed scheme came apart, and I watched it happen the way I used to watch stress tests on bridge models. Methodically, objectively, measuring the collapse. On Sunday morning, the day after the arrest, Catherine called at 8. "Brooke was arraigned at 7, she said. "The charges are formal. Forgery in the first degree, financial fraud, identity theft, conspiracy to commit elder financial exploitation, Oregon Revised Statute 465.100. Class C felony." "That's 4 counts," I said. "5, Catherine corrected. The district attorney added a charge overnight. Criminal impersonation. For the LLC, she used your name, your professional identity, and your patent portfolio to represent herself as a member of your family's business. That's a separate offense." "What about Nathan?" Catherine paused. Assistant DA Nakamura reviewed the evidence. "Nathan is not being charged. There's no proof he knew about the LLC, the forged account, or the arrangement with Dr. Mercer. The video and documents point exclusively to Brooke." I exhaled. I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath. "But Walter," Catherine continued, "Nathan will likely be called as a witness. He'll have to testify about the email, the Thanksgiving visit, the doctor's appointment. He'll have to answer questions about what he knew and when he knew it. That won't be easy for him." "Nothing about this has been easy," I said. On Monday, Marcus called with an update on Dr. Mercer. "The Oregon Medical Board moved fast," he said. "Faster than expected. Mercer's license has been suspended pending a formal review. The 3 prior cases, Helen Whitaker, Gerald Simmons, Margaret Chen, are all being reopened. The board is treating them as a pattern of fraudulent practice. Will he lose his license permanently?" "Almost certainly." Marcus paused. "There's more. The Whitaker family has retained an attorney. They're filing a civil suit against Mercer for damages. The Simmons family is doing the same in Washington. And Margaret Chen's case, which was already in litigation, has been strengthened significantly by the evidence we provided. 3 families. 3 elderly people who'd been declared incompetent by a doctor paid to lie. 3 lives disrupted, savings stolen, dignity stripped. Brooke hadn't invented the scheme. She'd simply perfected it. On Tuesday afternoon, Catherine forwarded me an email. The sender was a woman named Grace Emery, Richard Emery's daughter, the one who'd been estranged from her father for 6 years before Brooke entered his life, the one who'd found out about his death 3 weeks after it happened. The email was short. Dear Mr. Prescott, my name is Grace Emery. I understand you are pursuing legal action against Brooke Callahan, formerly Brooke Emery, who was married to my father Richard from 2018 to 2020. My father died alone in January of 2021. I believe your case and mine are connected. I have documentation, financial records, correspondence, and a civil complaint I filed in Arizona that was dismissed due to insufficient evidence. I would like to share these with your attorney. If your case can bring accountability for what was done to my father, I want to help. Sincerely, Grace Emery. I read it twice. Richard Emery, 74, widower, isolated, $380,000 stolen, dead within 6 months. His daughter reaching across state lines, across years of silence and regret, hoping someone would finally hold Brooke accountable for what she'd done. I forwarded the email to Catherine with one word. Yes. On Wednesday morning, Catherine, Marcus, and I met at her office for the final briefing before the preliminary hearing. The hearing is Friday at 9, Catherine said. Judge Patricia Lowe. She's thorough, fair, and has zero tolerance for elder exploitation cases. I've submitted the full evidentiary package, video, financial records, the patent bridge correspondence, Dr. Mercer's payment records, the forged bank account, and Grace Emery's Arizona documentation. What's the likely outcome? I asked. Catherine folded her hands. If the judge finds sufficient evidence, which she will, Brooke will be bound over for trial. Given the flight risk, the out-of-state history, and the pattern of behavior, I expect bail to be denied. Friday arrived cold and clear. The first morning without rain in 2 weeks. I drove to the Multnomah County Courthouse, parked in the structure on 4th Avenue, and walked through the metal detectors at 8:30. Catherine was already inside, reviewing her notes on a bench outside courtroom 2. The hearing lasted 47 minutes. Brooke sat at the defense table in an orange jumpsuit, her blonde hair pulled back, her face composed. Her court-appointed attorney, a young man named David Park, argued for reasonable bail. He cited Brooke's community ties, her family obligations, her lack of prior criminal convictions. Catherine stood and dismantled every argument in 6 minutes. She presented the Arizona history, the LLC, the forged signatures, the paid doctor, the patent bridge correspondence, the pattern spanning 2 states, and at least 3 prior victims. She submitted Grace Emery's documentation as supplemental evidence. Judge Lowe listened without interruption. When Catherine finished, the judge removed her glasses, looked directly at Brooke, and spoke. The defendant has demonstrated a documented pattern of targeting elderly individuals for financial exploitation. She has operated across multiple states under different names. She has forged legal documents, retained medical professionals to produce fraudulent evaluations, and created shell companies for the purpose of asset theft. The court finds the defendant to be a significant flight risk and a danger to vulnerable adults. Bail is denied. The defendant is remanded to custody pending trial. Brooke didn't flinch. She sat perfectly still, staring at the table, her hands folded in her lap. The same hands that had held my son's arm at Thanksgiving. The same hands that had pushed that forged power of attorney across my dining table. The same hands that had counted my money and planned my dispossession. I felt no satisfaction. I thought I would. I'd imagined this moment for weeks, but sitting in that courtroom, watching a woman my son had loved being led away in handcuffs, I felt only the heavy, exhausting weight of something necessary. Outside the courthouse, the February air was sharp. Catherine walked beside me to the parking structure. "It's done," she said. "The preliminary phase, at least. Trial will be in 3 to 4 months." I nodded. That night, at 9:47, my phone rang. "Nathan," I answered. His voice was hoarse, scraped raw, like he'd been crying for hours or days. "Dad," he said. "Can I come home?" I stood at my kitchen window. The same window I'd stood at on my birthday. The same view of Mount Hood. Invisible now, behind clouds. The same silence that had followed me through every room of this house for 3 years. I thought about what Catherine had said at my door weeks ago. "When this is over, Nathan is going to need you." Not the engineer. The father. I hadn't figured that part out yet. I still wasn't sure I had. But my son was on the phone, broken and asking. And Dorothy's voice whispered through the silence, the way it always did. "Let him come home, Walter. Not because he's earned it, because he's your son. The house is different now," I said. "And so am I." "But yes, Nathan, you can come home." He didn't respond. But I heard him breathe. A long, shaking exhale. The sound of a man setting down something he'd been carrying alone for far too long. Nathan didn't come home that night. Or the next. Or the one after that. He checked into a motel off Interstate 84, a place called the Riverside Lodge that was neither on a river nor a lodge. I know this because Marcus tracked his phone, not because I asked him to. Because Marcus understood that a man who's just watched his world collapse doesn't always make safe choices. For 3 days, Nathan didn't leave the room. He ordered delivery once. A pizza he didn't finish. The box sat on the nightstand until housekeeping removed it. He didn't call me. He didn't call Brooks' public defender. He didn't call anyone. He sat in a room with beige walls and a television he never turned on, and did whatever a man does when every truth he believed turns out to be a lie. I wanted to go to him. Every morning, I picked up my keys and put them down. Every evening, I stood at the front door with my coat on, and then took it off. Catherine had warned me. "Don't chase him. If you show up now, he'll think you're there to lecture. Or forgive. He's not ready for either." She was right. But being right didn't make the waiting easier. On the 4th day, a Thursday, Nathan walked into the office of Dr. Rebecca Thornton on Southeast Hawthorne Boulevard, a clinical psychologist specializing in grief, family trauma, and codependent relationships. Catherine had left her name and number with Nathan's phone before the arrest, tucked inside the lawyer's letter. A small card. No pressure. Just a door, if he wanted to open it. He opened it. I know what happened in that first session, only because Nathan told me months later, sitting on my porch with a cup of coffee and the careful honesty of a man learning how to tell the truth. Dr. Thornton asked him why he was there. He said 5 words. "I think I need help." She asked what kind of help. He said he didn't know. Everything was broken. His marriage, his relationship with his father, his understanding of the last 5 years. He didn't know what was real anymore. She asked about Dorothy. That's when he fell apart. Nathan told her about the 5 years of watching his mother disappear, about the first time Dorothy forgot his name. He'd been standing in the kitchen doorway, holding a bag of groceries, and she'd looked at him and said, "Excuse me, can you tell me where my husband is?" He'd set the groceries on the counter and walked out of the house, sat in his car for 40 minutes, drove back to Seattle that night, and didn't return for 7 months. He told Dr. Thornton about the guilt, the suffocating, paralyzing guilt of leaving his father alone to care for a dying woman while he hid 200 miles away. He'd told himself it was self-preservation, that watching his mother lose her mind would destroy him, that he couldn't handle it. But the truth, the thing he'd never said aloud, was simpler and uglier. He was afraid. Afraid that Alzheimer's was hereditary. Afraid that one day he'd forget his own children's names. Afraid that if he stayed too close to the disease, it would follow him home. So he ran. And in running, he left a gap that Brooke filled perfectly. She'd appeared in his life 3 months after Dorothy's funeral. Warm, certain, organized. She'd told him what to think and when to think it. She'd managed his finances, his schedule, his relationships. She'd told him his father was difficult, stubborn, controlling. She'd said the email was a healthy boundary. She'd said the doctor's appointment was compassion. She'd said everything he wanted to hear so he'd never have to think for himself. And he'd let her. Because letting someone else drive was easier than admitting he didn't know the road. Dr. Thornton didn't fix Nathan in 1 session, or 2, or 10, but she gave him something he hadn't had in years. A mirror, not the kind Brooke held up, which reflected only what she wanted him to see. A real one, the kind that shows you the parts of yourself you've been avoiding. Nathan attended sessions twice a week. Every Tuesday and Thursday, at 4 in the afternoon. He didn't miss one. In the second week of February, he moved out of the motel and into a studio apartment on Northeast Sandy Boulevard. Small, clean, 600 square feet. A bed, a desk, a kitchen barely large enough to turn around in. He paid the deposit with the last of his savings. He found a job. Not the kind of job he'd imagined when he was 25 and dreaming of tech startups and venture capital. A project coordinator position at a commercial construction firm in Beaverton, $47,000 a year, hard hat and steel-toed boots. He started on a Monday and came home with cement dust in his hair. He called me that evening. The first real phone call since the night he'd asked to come home. "I got a job," he said. His voice was different, quieter, stripped of the performance I'd grown accustomed to hearing. "Construction management. It's not glamorous. You're building things," I said. "There's nothing wrong with that." A pause. Then, very quietly, "Like you used to." "Yes," I said. "Like I used to." He began paying his debts. $420,000. He set up a repayment plan. $300 a month. At that rate, it would take over 100 years. But he called the creditors himself, negotiated reduced settlements where he could, and made every payment on time. It wasn't about the math. It was about the discipline, the act of facing something instead of hiding from it. In early March, he texted me. Short. Careful. The way a man texts when he's testing whether the bridge will hold his weight. "Dr. Thornton says I should write you a letter. About everything. About Mom. About the email. About what happened. I don't know if I'm ready yet, but I wanted you to know I'm trying," I replied. "Take your time. I'm not going anywhere." 2 days later, another text. This one shorter. "Can I visit?" 1 word back. "Yes." I set the phone down and walked to the porch. The rain had stopped. A thin line of blue cracked open above the West Hills. The first real break in the clouds since January. I stood there for a long time, watching the light shift across the sky. My son was 39 years old. He'd been manipulated by a woman who'd studied vulnerability, the way I'd studied structural engineering. He'd lost his marriage, his savings, his self-respect, and nearly his father. He was living in a studio apartment, working construction, paying off debts he'd carried for years. But he was trying. And trying, I'd learned, was the first load-bearing beam in any structure worth building. He came on a Saturday afternoon in the 3rd week of March. I heard his car pull into the driveway at 2:15. The engine cut. A door opened and closed. Then silence. A long silence. The kind that stretches between wanting to knock and being afraid of what happens when the door opens. I didn't go to the window. I sat at the kitchen table with 2 cups of coffee and waited. The knock came at 2:23. 8 minutes. He'd sat in his car for 8 minutes, gathering the courage to walk 30 feet. I opened the door. Nathan stood on the porch in a flannel jacket and work boots, cement dust still faintly visible on his jeans. His face was thinner than I remembered. The circles under his eyes had faded but not disappeared. He'd gotten a haircut. Short, clean. The kind of cut a man gets when he's trying to become a different version of himself. "Hi, Dad," he said. "Come in," I said. "Coffee's ready." We sat across from each other at the kitchen table. The same table where Dorothy used to spread her crossword puzzles on Sunday mornings. The same table where I'd fed Nathan oatmeal before school. The same table where Brooke had pushed a forged power of attorney across the woods 7 weeks ago. Nathan wrapped his hands around the coffee mug. Then he stopped, looked down at it. His thumb traced the chip on the handle. "This is Mom's mug," he said quietly. It was. The blue one with the chipped handle. The one he'd given her when he was 9. The one she refused to throw away. I'd been using it every morning for 3 years. I didn't plan it. I hadn't set it out intentionally. I'd simply grabbed 2 mugs from the shelf, and the blue one came first. But Nathan held it like it was made of something more fragile than ceramic. We didn't talk much that first visit. He asked about the house. I asked about the apartment. He told me about the construction job. A mixed-use development in Beaverton. Steel frame, 4 stories. He described the foundation work with a precision that surprised me. I hadn't heard him talk about building anything since he was a boy. "Do you like it?" I asked. He thought about it. "I like knowing that when I leave at the end of the day, something real is standing there, something I helped build." He paused. "I haven't felt that in a long time." He stayed for 90 minutes. When he left, he shook my hand at the door. Not a hug, a handshake. The gesture of a man rebuilding trust, one small, deliberate step at a time. I understood. Some distances can't be closed in a single afternoon. He came back the next Saturday. And the one after that. Each visit a little longer. Each conversation a little deeper. He told me about therapy. About Dr. Thornton's questions that he couldn't answer at first but was learning to sit with. About the nightmares. He dreamed about Dorothy sometimes. In the dreams, she recognized him. She said his name and smiled. And then he woke up and remembered she was gone. I told him about my own nights after Dorothy passed. The silence that filled the house like water filling a basement. The way I'd catch myself setting 2 places at the table. The morning I found one of her reading glasses in the couch cushion and sat holding it for an hour because it still smelled like her hand lotion. We didn't fix everything in those Saturday visits. But we started building something. Slowly, carefully. The way you lay a foundation, when you know the ground beneath it has been shaken. On the 4th Saturday, Nathan brought Emma and Lucas. I heard them before I saw them. Lucas's voice carried from the driveway like a small earthquake. "Grandpa?" The front door burst open, and he crashed into my legs with the full momentum of a 5-year-old who hadn't seen his grandfather in 3 months. "Grandpa, I missed you so much. Do you still have the train set? Is it still in the attic? Can I play with it? Did you get new trains?" I knelt down and held him. His arms locked around my neck with a strength that defied his size. He smelled like grape juice and laundry detergent. I closed my eyes and held on. Emma came through the door behind him. 8 years old and already carrying the quiet composure of someone twice her age. She walked up to me and took my hand. "Hi, Grandpa," she said. "I made you something." She reached into her backpack and pulled out a piece of paper. A drawing. Larger than the one she'd given me at Thanksgiving. More detailed. More deliberate. It showed 2 figures standing on a bridge. An older man and a younger woman. The older man had gray hair and glasses. The woman wore a white dress and smiled. Above the bridge, Emma had drawn a sun breaking through clouds. Below the bridge, water flowed in careful blue lines. Underneath, in her neat handwriting, she'd written, "Grandpa and Grandma Dorothy on the bridge they built together." I looked at the drawing for a long time. My throat closed. My eyes burned. I drew Grandma from the photos in the living room, Emma said. I hope that's okay. I pulled her into a hug. It's more than okay, I said. It's perfect. That afternoon, the house felt different. Not the way it had felt on Thanksgiving, when every smile was a performance and every word was calculated. This was real. Messy. Loud. Lucas found the train set and spent 2 hours crashing locomotives into each other on the attic floor. Emma sat at the kitchen table drawing while I made grilled cheese sandwiches, Dorothy's recipe, with sharp cheddar and a thin layer of mustard on sourdough. Nathan helped. He stood beside me at the stove, flipping sandwiches with a spatula, and for a few minutes neither of us spoke. We didn't need to. Some silences are empty. Others are full. In the late afternoon, we moved to the porch. The rain had held off all day. A rare gift. Mount Hood stood visible against the eastern sky, white-capped and sharp-edged, the way it looks only when the air is clean and the clouds have been pushed aside. Lucas fell asleep in my lap within 10 minutes. His head rested against my chest. One hand curled around my shirt collar. Emma sat cross-legged on the porch floor, sketching the mountain. Nathan sat beside me in the chair that had been Dorothy's. He didn't ask if it was okay. He just sat down. And somehow, that was exactly right. We watched the light change for a long time. The sun moved behind the hills. The sky turned gold, then copper, then a deep bruised purple. Dad, Nathan said quietly, I should have been here. All those years after Mom died, I should have been here with you. I looked at my son, 39 years old, thinner, tired, humbled in ways I wouldn't wish on anyone but grateful, in ways I recognized because I'd felt them myself. He was sitting in his mother's chair, on his mother's porch, watching his children exist in the space she'd loved most. I didn't disagree, but I didn't punish him for it either. Some truths don't need a verdict. They just need to be spoken, and heard, and carried forward into whatever comes next. 6 months after the signing, I stood in front of a room full of engineering students and said the name I'd been whispering to an empty house for 3 years. This foundation is named after my wife, Dorothy Ann Prescott. She forgot my name before she died, but I will never forget hers. The auditorium at Portland State University held 240 seats. Everyone was filled. Faculty in the front rows, students behind them, some in lab coats, some in hoodies, all of them young enough to believe that building something meaningful was still possible. A banner hung across the stage, the Dorothy Prescott STEM Foundation. Endowed in perpetuity, engineering the future through education. I'd spent 3 weeks writing my speech. Catherine had offered to review it. Marcus had offered to time it. I'd declined both. This wasn't a legal filing or an operation. This was a conversation with the only audience that mattered. Students who reminded me of who I'd been at their age. Young engineers who hadn't yet learned that the most important structures you'll ever build are the ones that hold your family together. Dorothy wanted this, I said, gripping the podium with both hands. She never told me directly because by the time I understood what mattered most to her, she couldn't form the words anymore. But I found it in her journals after she passed. Page after page about education. About giving young people the tools to build things that last. She wrote one line that I carry with me every day. The best bridges aren't made of steel. They're made of chances you give to people who need them. I paused. The room was quiet. Somewhere in the back row, a young woman wiped her eyes. The Dorothy Prescott STEM Foundation will fund full scholarships for engineering students at this university. 10 scholarships per year. Tuition, books, lab fees, everything. The only requirement is that you want to build something. A bridge, a building, a better world. Dorothy didn't care about grades or test scores. She cared about people who showed up. I stepped back from the podium. The applause started slowly. then filled the room. I didn't hear most of it. I was looking at the third row, where Nathan sat beside Emma and Lucas. He'd arrived early, taken his seat without fanfare. Emma had her sketchbook in her lap. Lucas was fidgeting with a button on his jacket. Nathan wore a collared shirt and clean jeans. His hands were folded in his lap. His eyes were steady. 2 weeks before the ceremony, the trial had concluded. Brooks' case went before Judge Patricia Lowe on a Tuesday morning in late July. Catherine had prepared for months. The evidence was overwhelming. The forged bank account, the LLC, the patent bridge correspondence, Dr. Mercer's recorded confession, Grace Emery's testimony from Arizona, delivered via video link with the steady voice of a woman who had waited 5 years for this moment. Brooks' attorney, David Park, argued for leniency. First offense: no prior criminal record under her current name. He emphasized her role as a mother. He asked the court to consider her children. Judge Lowe listened. Then she delivered her sentence. Brooke Ann Prescott, formerly Brooke Ann Callahan, you have been found guilty of forgery in the first degree, financial fraud, identity theft, criminal impersonation, and conspiracy to commit elder financial exploitation. This court sentences you to 4 years in the Oregon State Correctional Institution. Upon release, you will serve 3 years of supervised probation. You are ordered to pay restitution of $45,000 to Walter Prescott and $380,000 to the estate of Richard James Emery. You are permanently barred from working in any capacity involving financial management, elder care, or legal services. Brooke stood motionless. Her face was blank. She didn't look at Nathan. She didn't look at anyone. The officers led her away through a side door. It closed behind her, with a sound like a period at the end of a very long sentence. Dr. Alan Mercer's case was resolved separately. The Oregon Medical Board revoked his license permanently in June. Criminal charges followed: 3 counts of filing fraudulent medical evaluations, 2 counts of conspiracy to commit elder exploitation. His trial was scheduled for September. The families of Helen Whitaker, Gerald Simmons, and Margaret Chen had all filed civil suits. His practice was shuttered. His reputation was gone. Nathan filed for divorce in May. Brooke didn't contest it. The proceedings were brief and mechanical. Nathan was granted full custody of Emma and Lucas. The judge cited Brooke's criminal conviction and the documented pattern of manipulation. Nathan signed the papers in Catherine's office on a Wednesday afternoon. He didn't celebrate. He just set down the pen and said, "Okay, what's next?" What came next was this auditorium, this stage, this moment. After my speech, the university provost invited questions from the audience. A young man in the second row raised his hand. He was maybe 20, dark-haired, nervous. "Mr. Prescott, what advice would you give to an engineering student who's just starting out?" I thought about it. "Build things that last," I said. "And I don't just mean bridges." The room laughed softly. Then the provost began to close the ceremony. But before she could finish, someone stood in the third row. Nathan. He didn't ask for the microphone. He walked to the edge of the stage, and the provost, sensing something in his posture, stepped aside and handed it to him. Nathan stood in front of 240 people. His hands trembled. His voice shook on the first word. But he didn't stop. "My name is Nathan Prescott," he said. "Walter is my father. Dorothy was my mother." He swallowed. The room waited. "My mother taught me how to love. She taught me by example every single day, until the day she couldn't remember how. My father taught me how to fight for the people you love. He taught me by doing it, even when the person he was fighting for didn't deserve it." His voice cracked. He pressed on. "I forgot both lessons. For years, I forgot them. I let fear and weakness and the wrong person convince me that running away was the same as protecting myself. It wasn't. Running away is just a slower way of losing everything. He looked at me. His eyes were wet but open, unguarded in a way I hadn't seen since he was a boy. This foundation carries my mother's name, but it exists because my father refused to give up. On her memory, on his family, on me. Even when I gave him every reason to. He paused. The room was absolutely still. "I won't forget again," he said quietly. "I promise." He set the microphone on the podium and walked back to his seat. Emma reached for his hand. Lucas climbed into his lap. Nathan held them both and stared straight ahead. The room applauded. I didn't hear them. I was looking at my son, standing where his mother would have stood, saying the words she would have said. And for the first time in 3 years, I saw her in him. Not the disease, not the forgetting, the love, the stubborn, inconvenient, unbreakable love that Dorothy carried in everything she did. She would have been proud. Not of the foundation, not of the money or the scholarships or the banner with her name. She would have been proud of Nathan, for standing up, for telling the truth, for choosing, finally, to show up. That's all she ever wanted from any of us. The auditorium at Portland State University seated 240 people. Every chair was taken. I stood behind the podium in a charcoal suit Dorothy had picked out 7 years ago. The fabric still smelled faintly of cedar from the closet where it had hung untouched since her memorial. Catherine sat in the second row, legs crossed, a leather folder on her lap. Marcus Cole stood near the back door, arms folded, scanning the room out of habit. Grace Emery, Richard's daughter, had flown in from Scottsdale. She sat near the aisle, a tissue already in her hand. The banner behind me read, "The Dorothy Prescott STEM Foundation, Building Bridges That Last." I adjusted the microphone. The room fell silent. "She forgot my name," I said. No one moved. October 14th, 2019. A Tuesday. I walked into her room at the memory care facility on Burnside, and she looked at me the way you'd look at a stranger in a grocery store. Polite, distant, empty. I said, "Dorothy, it's Walter." She smiled and said, "That's a nice name." 5 years of marriage photos on her nightstand, 38 years of building a life together. And she thought Walter was a nice name. I paused. 240 people breathed together. But here's what Alzheimer's couldn't take. It couldn't take the way she folded my shirts, always collar first. Always with 2 extra creases, because she said it gave the fabric character. It couldn't take the cranberry sauce recipe she wrote on an index card and taped inside the cabinet above the stove. It couldn't take the garden she planted along the south fence, roses, lavender, and one stubborn hydrangea that blooms every June, no matter how cold the winter. It couldn't take the fact that every single morning, even when she didn't know who I was, she reached for my hand. I let the silence hold. Dorothy was not an engineer. She was a 3rd-grade teacher for 26 years at Ainsworth Elementary. She taught children how to read, how to add, and how to believe that what they built with their hands and their minds mattered. She didn't design bridges. She built the people who would. I looked at the front row. Emma sat with her hands folded in her lap, her newest drawing tucked under her chair, a bridge stretching across a river, with a woman standing in the center, arms open. Lucas fidgeted beside her, his sneakers barely touching the floor, but his eyes were locked on mine. This foundation will award 10 full scholarships every year. Tuition, books, lab fees. Everything a young engineer needs to begin. The only requirement is this. You must want to build something. Not for profit. Not for prestige. For the person on the other side of the bridge who needs a way across. The applause started slowly, then filled the room. 2 weeks before the ceremony, Judge Patricia Lowe had delivered Brooks' sentence in courtroom 2 of the Multnomah County Courthouse. 4 years, Oregon State Correctional Institution. 3 years, supervised probation upon release. Full restitution $45,000 to Walter Prescott. $380,000 to the estate of Richard James Emery. A permanent injunction barring Brooke Ann Callahan from any employment in financial services, elder care, legal assistance, or medical administration in the state of Oregon, with reciprocal filings in Arizona, Washington, and California. Brooke stood in an orange jumpsuit, her hair pulled back, her face stripped of every careful mask she had ever worn. She said nothing. The defense attorney, David Park, requested leniency based on a difficult childhood. Judge Lowe replied that difficult childhoods did not entitle anyone to steal from the elderly or exploit the vulnerable. Dr. Alan Mercer's medical license had been permanently revoked in early June. The Oregon Medical Board cited 3 counts of fraudulent cognitive evaluation, 2 counts of filing false medical reports, and 1 count of conspiracy to commit conservatorship fraud. Criminal charges followed within a week. Civil suits from the families of Helen Whitaker, Gerald Simmons, and Margaret Chen were proceeding simultaneously. Catherine estimated Mercer's total liability would exceed $1.2 million. Nathan had filed for divorce in May. The family court granted him full custody of Emma and Lucas, citing Brooke's criminal conviction, her history of identity fraud, and evidence of financial manipulation within the marriage. Brooke did not contest the custody ruling. Nathan told me later she hadn't even looked at the children's names on the filing. After my opening remarks, I stepped aside and introduced the next speaker. Nathan walked to the podium. He wore a navy blazer, no tie, top button open. His hands trembled as he adjusted the microphone. He had rehearsed this speech 11 times in his apartment on any Sandy. I know because he called me after the 9th draft and said, "Dad, I don't know if I can do this." I told him what Dorothy would have told him. Start with what's true. He started. My mother taught me how to love, he said. His voice cracked on the second word. He steadied himself. She taught me that love isn't a feeling. It's a decision you make every morning when you wake up and choose to show up for the people who need you. I stopped making that decision. For a long time, I stopped. He looked at Emma and Lucas. My father taught me how to fight for the people you love. Not with anger. Not with volume. With patience. With evidence. With the quiet certainty that doing the right thing matters more than doing the easy thing. He swallowed. I forgot both lessons. I won't forget again. The room stood. Emma reached under her chair, pulled out her drawing, and held it up the bridge, the woman with open arms, and 2 small figures walking toward her from opposite sides. Lucas tugged Nathan's sleeve as he stepped down from the podium. "Daddy, was that about Grandma?" Nathan knelt, pulled both children close, and whispered, "Yes, every word." I watched from the side of the stage. Catherine caught my eye and nodded once. Grace Emery wiped her cheeks. Marcus Cole, near the back door, allowed himself a small, rare smile. I looked at the banner. Dorothy's name in white letters against navy blue. She forgot my name, but I would make sure no one forgot hers. The house was quiet, in the way it used to be when Dorothy was alive. Not empty quiet, but full quiet. The kind of silence that meant everyone was exactly where they were supposed to be. Emma and Lucas had fallen asleep on the living room floor. Emma lay on her stomach with her sketchbook open beneath her cheek, a colored pencil still loosely held between her fingers. The page showed a half-finished drawing: a porch, 2 chairs, a sunset. Lucas had curled up beside her, his head resting on the stuffed bear Dorothy had bought him the week he was born. His sneakers were still on. Nathan had draped a wool blanket over both of them before stepping outside. I poured 2 glasses of bourbon. Not the expensive bottle. The one Dorothy and I had kept on the second shelf for Tuesday nights, when there was nothing to celebrate, except the fact that we were still here. I carried both glasses to the front porch. Nathan was sitting in Dorothy's chair. He didn't realize it. Or maybe he did. Either way, I didn't say anything. I handed him the glass and sat in mine. The wicker creaked the way it always creaked. 2 short sounds and 1 long one. like a sentence that never quite finished. The rain had stopped 3 hours ago. The air smelled like wet cedar, and the last of the lavender along the south fence. Mount Hood stood in the distance, its peak catching the final orange light of the longest day of the year. June 21st. Summer solstice. The evening Dorothy and I had sat in these exact chairs 14 years ago and decided to stop worrying about the future. She loved this time of day, I said. Nathan turned the glass in his hands. I remember. She used to say the light was honest. Honest? She said morning light flatters everything, makes the world look clean. But evening light shows you what's real. The cracks in the paint, the weeds in the garden, the things you ignored all day. He took a small sip. She said if you could love something in evening light, you could love it forever. I hadn't heard that before. Or maybe I had, and I'd forgotten. Dorothy said 10,000 things across 38 years. Some I wrote down, some I carried without knowing. Some were lost to the same disease that took her name and her face and her hands. But not her voice. I could still hear her voice low, steady, with a small rise at the end of every sentence, as if every statement she made was also an invitation. Dad. Yes. I'm not going to say I'm sorry again. Good. Not because I'm not. Because Dr. Thornton says apologies become a crutch if you repeat them too many times. She says the real work is in the living, in showing up. I nodded. Dorothy would have liked Dr. Thornton. Dr. Thornton would have liked Mom. He paused. Everyone liked Mom. We sat for a while. A heron crossed the sky heading west toward the river. The streetlights on the hill clicked on one by one in a slow amber chain. Somewhere below us, a neighbor's dog barked twice and stopped. The foundation got 47 applications this week, I said. Catherine's office is reviewing them. First 10 recipients will be announced in September. Emma asked me if she could apply when she grows up. She's 8. I told her she had to finish 3rd grade first. She said Grandma Dorothy would have let her apply early. I smiled. She was right. Dorothy would have bent every rule for that girl. Nathan leaned forward, elbows on his knees. The bourbon caught the porch light. I'm almost current on the Meridian debt, he said. 14 months of payments. Still owe $162,000. But the settlement reduced the interest. The Beaverton project gave me a raise last month. $51,000 now. That's good, Nathan. It's not enough. It's not close to what I cost you. You didn't cost me anything. He looked at me. Brooke cost me $45,000 and 14 months of peace, I said. You cost me something different. You cost me the belief that I had done enough as a father, that the bridges I built for other people somehow counted as bridges for my own son. They didn't. I should have built one for you a long time ago. Nathan's jaw tightened. He looked at the sky. Mom's hydrangea is blooming, he said quietly. I turned. Along the south fence, the stubborn blue hydrangea Dorothy had planted 11 years ago had opened overnight. A single cluster of blossoms, impossibly bright against the dark fence boards. It bloomed every June, regardless of frost, drought, or neglect. Dorothy said it was the most honest plant in the garden because it didn't care what you thought of it. It just decided to bloom. Yeah, I said. It does that. The porch light hummed. Inside, Lucas shifted in his sleep, murmured something about trains, and went still. Emma's pencil finally slipped from her fingers and rolled across the sketchbook page. Nathan finished his bourbon and set the glass on the railing. Same time next Saturday? He asked. Same time. He stood. He didn't hug me. We weren't there yet. And that was fine. Some bridges take years to build. You lay the foundation. You test the load. You trust the engineering. The rest is time. He walked inside, knelt beside his children, and lifted Lucas into his arms. Emma woke on her own, rubbed her eyes, and picked up her sketchbook. She looked at me through the screen door and waved with the hand still holding the colored pencil. Good night, Grandpa. Good night, sweetheart. Nathan carried Lucas to the car. Emma followed, clutching her drawing. The headlight swung across the driveway, caught the hydrangea for a single bright second, and disappeared down the hill. I sat in my chair. Dorothy's chair sat beside me, empty and full at the same time. The evening light settled over Portland. Honest light. The kind that shows you everything. The cracks, the weeds, the things you almost lost and the things you kept. I finished my bourbon. I was 70 years old. I had built 41 bridges in my career, 12 patents that would now fund scholarships for strangers, and one foundation named after a woman who forgot my name but never stopped reaching for my hand. And on this porch, in this light, I was building one more. If this story touched your heart, subscribe and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Family isn't about blood. It's about who shows up. Thank you for staying until the end.